For me, personally, life drawing is huge. It is both holy grail and a tormentor. It is a touchstone for describing form, drawing, a visual art, with extreme seriousness. It's a talisman against anti-art. Not least of all, it's an existential opportunity for the ghost to recognize its shell. Since the dawn of consciousness and culture, describing the human body through drawings has been undertaken relentlessly. Is it something about achieving self-awareness? It happens for children shortly after they first start drawing. They might arrange the central figures among the central features in their tiny lives: family, home, tree. The fascination extends from individual figures and bodies to groups of figures and bodies. What happens when we see a group of figures standing or lolling around, interacting or not interacting? Figure arrangements crave our attention as social animals. We operate in troops of hominids, and when we see troops of hominids, we're interested. We want to know what is going on with the pack. Artists have lavished great attention on their arrangements of figures to create intriguing and dramatic effect. This attention is not overlooked in theatre, where directors take great precognitive measures to quote-unquote block in figure arrangements to facilitate narrative and drama. Choreography in dance deals with the same aesthetic of the human body and human bodies. And so does film. Storyboard artists spend enormous quantities of time plotting out figure compositions and camera moves, and directors take these preliminary drawings and use them or alter them as they see fit. Most dramatic movies can be seen the same way as you might look at theatrical, traditional figure drawing or painting. There is probably nothing in visual art I've done that has been more meaningful than life drawing. I've spent thousands of hours observationally life drawing, connecting the eye, the mind, and the hand, and cannot recommend it highly enough. How important do I think it is? So important, I've even modeled for life drawing myself a few times, and despite my own physical self-loathing and encroaching old age and decrepitude, I do it again. To be fair, some of the best models I've ever drawn have been older, like George here, who modelled at the Ontario College of Art for 3 decades or more. Generations of artists knew George and his likeness and form. George was retired against his will at 65, and this poster was an attempt to drum up modelling gigs in the visual arts and student art community surrounding the college and Art Gallery of Ontario in downtown Toronto. As I've mentioned before, I can think of no better credential for a visual artist, with the emphasis on visual, than being able to draw, and draw the human figure, not just adequately, but superbly. Not only does the ability to draw well demonstrate competency in a fundamental visual skill, but this competency indicates that you have taken the time to invest vast amounts of time and energy into studying form, shape, and structure, all of which will influence your ability to make visual art, to design, to think better visually about the forms and images that intrude into your life. Think of the vast numbers of abstract biomorphic templates that might be visualized in a human body for study and internalization. We can also include all the biomorphic forms of the skeleton we previously looked at within the context of the human body. Alas, we have one class to devote to this. If you would like to pursue figure drawing further, it is my hope to be able to offer life drawing courses of one sort or another again in the future, which will delve deeper into the subject. Keep in touch. What I hope to do with this section is briefly introduce you to the structure of a fairly standard life drawing session, and also some fairly standard life drawing exercises, as well as giving you some time to draw freestyle, that is, in the manner that suits you. This is a brief survey of life drawing methods. These few exercises we are about to try are perhaps like mind-altering drugs. What you see looks different when you apply the lens of a drawing exercise to the human form. Or perhaps the exercises are like putting on a pair of glasses that alter what you can see. Ever see the schlock sci-fi film They Live? The protagonist, a homeless worker called John Nada, a nobody, finds some sunglasses which, when he puts them on, reveals truths about what he is seeing condensed into words. For example, he can clearly see that the images in advertising are communicating. He can clearly see what the images in advertising are communicating in a terse word or two. Of course, he can also see the aliens who are controlling the advertising and the consumer economy and profiting from it. Well, ekphrasis doesn't really work for me. You can't turn pictures into a few words because pictures, even though they are communicating things, aren't really saying things. If you want to say something, just say it. Images are ambiguous and the better for it. But the movie They Live is a wonderful scenario, and one that alludes to the startling effect of changing how you see by looking through a completely different lens. This is what the standard drawing exercises do. You might be reluctant to engage with them because they seem too confining, but the exercises actually liberate. They stimulate your visual sensibility and can improve and alter how you draw. For example, there is many a time I'm not on my game arriving at a life drawing session, but by doing a couple of 5-minute blind contoured drawings, I'm forced to start looking more intensely. Things improve afterward. Furthermore, practicing these exercises will affect your personal drawing style as much as your way of seeing. The varying degrees of influence from each discrete exercise combine and recombine as you gain maturity into a drawing style that's uniquely yours. Looking at these drawings, I can see the parts of these particular drawings. I can see the parts of a number of types of drawing exercise, but the sum of the parts is a unique emergent style with a hybrid vigor. Here's a consideration. I've watched people draw for years. One of the most frequent but understandable mistakes for a drawer is to succumb to the desire to produce a sick, clever, pretty drawing. Here's how it might happen. You look at the subject. You draw. You look at your subject. You draw. You draw. You draw. You draw. You become consumed with looking at your drawing and trying to produce a slick, clever, pretty drawing that you will be pleased with. In a sense, you have your head up your arse, and I speak from experience. Instagram is full of slick, clever, pretty pictures. This isn't just a beginner's mistake. In fact, beginners often receive a degree of insulation from this curse because they lack skill and refinement. They might possibly genuinely struggle with their observation and be less inclined to let affectation, aspiration, expectation, ego, and self-absorption take them astray. Zen mind, beginner's mind. I often find student drawings deeply engaging, full of mistakes, dutifully discovered and corrected, creating a piantamento imbued with an authenticity that experienced artists might have to struggle to achieve. Experienced artists have to struggle to behold with an innocent eye, engage with a beginner's mind with authenticity. I struggle. But these exercises can put you in the right place, whether you're a beginner or an old hand like me. Life drawing sessions. They usually run 2 or 3 hours. They start with quick poses of perhaps 30 seconds, 1 minute, often 2 minutes. This all depends on the group and the organizer. After a number of these quick poses, the group usually moves into a series of 5-minute poses, then some 10s, a couple of 15s, perhaps 20 minutes, and usually ends with a quote-unquote long pose, which might range from 40 minutes to an hour or even more. The length of that long pose, as with the number of shorter poses, depends very much on how long the actual sessions themselves are. This structure will change from group to group, but generally the vast majority of sessions proceed similar to this description. However, I've attended sessions in animation studios which consisted of 3 hours of 30-second, 1 minute, and 2-minute drawings to satiate the appetite of animators for dynamic gestural poses. At the end of each pose, there was a furious noise of paper being ripped violently from newsprint pads and thrown aside, and at the end of the session there were heaps of drawings, most of which would immediately go in the garbage. When life drawing, of course you want to create a masterpiece, but hopefully not some clever, slick, and pretty drawing, I hasten to add. But what are the chances of you creating a masterpiece of that? What you are able to do for certain is practice connecting the eye, the mind, and the hand. That is, practice and train your skills of observation, visual processing, and manual dexterity. This is why newsprint is popular for life drawing sessions. It's cheap. I once ran a life drawing session where a woman I know would pull a large garbage can over beside her easel, and after each pose ended, she would rip her drawing off the pad and throw it straight in the trash. Now you have a sense of the structure of life drawing sessions. Let's look at the exercises. First, we'll look at gesture. Gesture drawing tries to capture the latent energy and dynamic vectors coiled within the dynamic short poses the models will generally take when you first arrive. These short poses are often called gestures. Someone will say, oh, shall we start with 2 minutes of gestures? But not everyone draws gestures for these 2-minute poses. Gestures imply an attempt to capture the gesture of a pose, not actually draw or render a figure. 30 seconds is time enough to capture a gesture. The drawing on the left here, for example, and here, the drawing on the left. And then on the right here are drawings of closer to 2 minutes. And again, these drawings on the right are gestural, but less of a gesture drawing. As you draw between the 1 and 2 minute mark, you are probably already getting into drawing proper rather than doing gesture drawing. You might describe this result as gestural drawing rather than gesture drawing. A true gesture, as far as I'm concerned, probably concerns itself with just the extending and the expression of dynamic vectors. There is danger in this exercise for beginners, and this applies to some of the other exercises. I urge you in no way to think of the outline overbearingly when doing gesture. This is not to suggest you can't do gestures with outline and technically still call them gesture or a gestural drawing. But the outline is not generally where the dynamic thrusts bursting from the form reside. In drawing in general, I see outline distracting beginner drawers regularly because they want to make a clean, slick, clever, and pretty drawing. Look for the inside information. I urge you. The spine. Imagine the huge femurs under the mass of the thighs. Use the side of your crayon as much as the tip. You can use the side exclusively, making your line thicker and thinner. Another thing is if you see the weight on one leg, make the lines of that leg thicker. Get a sense of the weight on it, and where there's no weight, use the crayon in more lightly. Something else to consider is that in a way every drawing or figure drawing, even one done over the course of hours, could start with light, suggestive, dynamic gestures, vectors that could be considered gesture to allow you to feel out the placement of your subject on the page. You might hope that the dynamism of that original light gesture drawing will somehow impart an energetic quality to your final, more considered drawing. Now here's another important exercise that you will probably loathe as much as my studio students do. And as I did a little bit as a student. But if you keep drawing for years, you will learn to appreciate it. This is the exercise I alluded to earlier, the one that sharpens my powers of observation in the event I arrive at a drawing session having got up on the wrong side of the bed or hungover. This is blind contour and generates considerable rolling of the eyes or folding of the arms among studio students because they are usually in a hurry to create a slick, clever, or pretty drawing. But from the point of view of the perspective of trained artists, this exercise goes a long way to creating a type of drawing that is profoundly authentic. For this exercise, you will look intently at your subject, the model in this case. You will not take your eyes off the model. You will draw on a piece of paper underneath another piece of paper in your sketchbook, so that there could be no chance of seeing what you are doing. You're drawing blind. You need to take your time with this drawing exercise, and your degree of concentration should be such that your eyes tear up and run down your cheek, making the paper covering your drawing sodden. Imagine the sheet of paper below you. Imagine placing the model within that two-dimensional space. Feel around and touch the tip of your pencil or crayon on the paper where you think, for example, the nose should be within the aspect ratio of the paper. Now, looking intently, imagine that your pencil is touching the nose of the model. You might as well start somewhere like that. Slowly move your crayon over the model's face, neck, chest, body, radiating outward, moving slowly if you double back on your course. Do not ever remove the crayon tip from the surface of the paper. This is as tactile drawing of the model that we will ever get. And as you know, tactile values seem essential for describing form. You are literally groping with your eyes and your pencil. There is no other way to describe it. Later in this prudish and increasingly sterile 21st century, I fully expect the contour drawing of nude models to be banned for moral degeneracy and indecency. Engage in the hopeless task of trying to follow your eyes, or at least where they are focused. Think again of saccades, your eye movements, but try not to flit from limb to limb. Try to slow your eye movements down. Proceed slowly with caution. Yes, you can and might trace your eyes and crayon around the outline, but don't confine the path of your eyes to the outline. Look for the inside information. You can see crinkles and wrinkles that wrap around the form. More than that, even when you have a vast, smooth areas of unblemished flesh, imagine drawing your crayon on the model across them. There will be dips and rises in the body due to musculature and bone. Push and pull with your crayon. Imagine pushing and pulling. When I was a student back in the day, there were instructors who were artists who literally had their students dip their fingers in pots of paint and paint the model with their hands. Imagine if you did that, exploring the model's body by touch with your finger, constantly dipping the finger in black paint, for example, leaving trailing vectors all over the body in the same way as you are doing with your eyes and crayon. If you could turn those actual lines on the model's body into thick wires hanging in three-dimensional space, you might have something akin to these wire sculptures by Alexander Calder. If you painted the actual physical model with lines, photographed the model's line-covered form, desaturated the photograph, pumped up the contrast so that there was just black and white, you would have a two-dimensional contour drawing here, like this. Except that I have drawn cross contours on the body, not contours. Or look at this crumpled paper. Again, the line was actually drawn on the paper, which was crumpled into a topography, and now that line describes the form, becoming essentially a two-dimensional drawing. Drawing students seem initially dissatisfied with this blind contour exercise because they expect to learn how to draw something correctly. We've covered how to do that in our measuring of angles and proportions, but I've witnessed the power of observation and comprehension that this particular exercise, contour drawing, instills over and over again. What I notice most frequently in contour drawings, besides a stronger representation of form, is the following. Students who, even when measuring angles and proportions, fail to draw the structure of hands and feet, which are very complex assemblages of forms to represent, end up drawing them convincingly, even if they are in fact somewhat distorted. I have to earn my pay bringing attention to these remarkable accomplishments because the students are generally so dismayed because of the distortion of form. I like to look at successful blind contour drawings, but the real achievement of them is to project the artist into a keener level of consciousness, observation, and perception that allows for a lyrically successful describing of form. There's another but profound benefit to blind contour drawing. This is that it's an accelerant for training in visual spatial facility. Consider that you can't actually see what you are doing as you draw. You have to imagine you're drawing. You are drawing and mapping in the dark. It is just like being the prisoner in the dark room. You are creating a virtual composition just like the blind artist, Sergi Mann. When you open your eyes and look at what you've done, there appears a profound disconnect between what you thought you were drawing and what you have actually done. But look closely, keep looking, and as the mental image of sorts of the dark room, and much as the mental image of sorts of the dark room merges with what you are seeing when the lights are on, you start to recognize the drawing paths you took in the contour exercise. I can't recommend the exercise highly enough, and constant usage will encourage you to wrap line around forms you draw in a lyrical and convincing way that will influence your personal drawing style for the better. Moving on. Now try a contour drawing and allow yourself to look at the paper. This should be done after blind contour drawing. How about cross contour drawing? This is like wrapping your subject, your model, in a perspective grid. It's analogous to the kind of wireframe structures you get in digital modeling. You probably want to very lightly sketch in the proportions of your figure first. You could perhaps start with horizontal lines wrapped around the figure like this. And here's a wonderful topographical example I also found online. And here's the work of Angela Palma, mechanical, not lyrical. I have no idea if she can actually draw, but her method here is artful. She traces CAT scan cross-sections of humans and mummies onto plate glass and arranges them in slats, creating an ethereal sculpture or image with a three-dimensional quality that is reminiscent of holography. Contour or cross-contour, you must pay close attention to lumps and bumps and push and pull with your crayon over them as they are perceived. I see many students crank cross contours out in an ill-considered manner, and they end up with incoherent crisscrossing within the confines of an outline that really just looks like cut fabric. This should not be the case. Think of how, when you draw lines for a perspective grid, they should become closer together as they reach a horizon. The outline, the edge of a globe, is precisely the same kind of horizon, only curved. You can see the lines condense at the edge of the perceived ball. Likewise, with any form. See how lines get closer together at the edge? They may well even start to overlap, creating a strong sense of outline. We've looked at the sculpture and drawings of Henry Moore in the previous video on the Skellington. Consider his drawings again here. There is modeling through shading of sorts, as you can readily see. But notice how he's drawn contour lines on the forms as well. In fact, some of his sculpture is actually scribed with line work, presumably to help emphasize the feeling of form. Another technique he uses is to imagine that his figures and forms are made up of plates, so to speak. Is this because his bronze sculptures might sometimes have been made of thick plates of metal welded together? I don't know. The effect is somewhat something akin to riveted plates of metal, as we might see them on the hulls of ships in shipyards. Consider the powerful effect on the mind of line, and particularly contour line and cross contour line, to give the suggestion of form. Could you walk across this floor? Or this? Akin to contour is wraparound drawing. You might think of the invisible man swaddled in cloth to pass as visible, or the mummy, or a mummy, again swaddled in cloth. You'll take your crayon and draw it sideways, imagining you're wrapping and curving it around the actual figure. This is, much like people wrap themselves in toilet paper to be a mummy on Halloween. This is a less particular approach in terms of detail and contour drawing. You're after broad strokes, quite literally. Spheres or circles and ovals or biomorphic shapes are an oft-used module for constructing the human form in the same way that they feature strongly in old-fashioned artists' mannequins. You can build a figure with circular and oval modules by stretching and distorting circles to ovals to elongated biomorphic shapes. Work lightly at first, and when you hit the sweet spot, intensify the pressure on the crayon to define form. As you work more and more circles over and build up line, an outline will materialize and a tangible illusion to form will emerge. One problem for beginner drawers, in my experience, as I might have mentioned, is that they tend to fixate on outline. Highly trained artists with highly trained ability might be able to quickly sketch in an outline. I'm not one, and it is highly unlikely you are. So it's best to look for inside information. Build up the drawing using vectors like the spinal column, breast muscles, hip structure, all of which exist within the perceived outline of the figure. Look at these Alberto Giacometti figure and portrait drawings. They construct and extend themselves from the insides out, not on the outline. There are large gaps in the outlines that allow negative space outside the figure to apparently intrude inside of the figure. This could be an exercise for you to build a figure without drawing any outlines, using inside structures and forms only. An opposite exercise, of course, would be to concentrate purely on outline. Like, why not? I'm urging you to do one thing, but try doing the other. Things may well go awry proportionally working this way, but do your best. In doing this, pay attention perhaps to varying line, that is, thicker, thinner lines. Don't hesitate to create piantamento, that is, multiple attempts to find the correct line, working lightly at first and then later putting in a really dark line to finish when you find the line that works. Experiment getting back to varying the line, as the outline indents at the waist perhaps, or dips in curves. This is where you could press harder and thicken the line. It will tend to suggest form. And also experiment with overlapping line. Some outlines will pull forward, over, traverse, inward, away from the outline, following folds in the skin or musculature, while other parts of the outline fall behind. Try creating a drawing with only straight lines. This is a good exercise to force your measuring of angles or proportions, as almost every straight line could have its angle measured. Oddly, a series of straight lines eventually looks like curves. The first few exercises offered were the very best ones to follow. In a drawing class strictly based around the figure, I would drum up more, sometimes silly ones. I might have you spend some time looking at robots in film, television, advertising, and in reality, and have you do a long pose, turning your model into a robot. Looking at all the kind of, comparing the engineering and architecture of robots to the engineering and the architecture of the human form is comparative and instructive. We might look at photos of comparative anatomy and make comparisons. And I might make you turn your figure into a humanimal or a humungulate. The human skeleton is shockingly similar in terms of componentry to animal anatomy. The main difference seems simply the stretching and compressing of bones proportionally by millions of years of evolutionary processes. I would probably have you try and draw a pose from memory, something we discussed in an earlier video. We would try having the model move in a stop-motion series of related poses. Drawings from each of these poses could then be photographed and put in a sequence, making them, quote-unquote, animate. We might have the model rotate or turn ourselves around the model, creating a drawing which again would be photographed and could be photographed and essentially be made into to turn in an animation sequence of sorts. Our class time in this basic drawing class will limit us to doing just a few of these aforementioned exercises, but if you are savvy to a few of them, you can experiment with the ones we miss on your own by attending a local life drawing session. Whether you take another drawing course with me doesn't matter. If you regularly attend drop-in life drawing sessions, you can pursue all of these perceptually mind-expanding exercises and ways of seeing for years to come. One final point, you don't stop learning once the class is over. You take your drawings home, you lay them out, you debrief yourself, you keep looking, you look at your own attempts, you go online and look at the attempts of others from your group, from other groups, from the art historical record. You separate what you like from what you separate from your own drawings what you like and what you are uncertain of or dislike. You make two piles, one for what you like and one for what you don't like. You review your drawings several times between sessions, sorting and resorting. You are not interrogating the work intellectually as to why you think it's good or bad. You are following gut feelings to make your decisions, and these will change over time. 6 months later, you will go through all the drawings again, and a year later, some drawings will be tossed out, probably lots in my case, but in others, you will have learned so much more about drawing by over the time since you originally did the drawings, by drawing regularly, that strengths and authenticities will be revealed to you that you failed to see before. Some things from the pile of duds will migrate to the pile of keepers, and vice versa.